all those moments will be lost in time.
Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So I've done a couple of videos about my queer theory class. Okay, I found it. I was worried I wasn't gonna find it. Okay, so each bullet point has a title and then a description of what exactly I mean. So for example, the bullet points, there's one that's material narrative, another one is inconsistency, another one is knowledge on material, and another one is preferential treatment. We all know that her and Sam were BFF. I thought I could read these to you just so you could see that I wasn't just like bitching and complaining, but had some actually valid points and points that other people in the class agreed with. One of the points that Kelsey made in the original video was that everyone we talked to, and we talked to I'd say 95% of the class, had some issue with this class. Like they were saying that they didn't understand the material or they felt like the material wasn't explained. So the feelings that I'm saying here are by no means unpopular feelings or unpopular opinions on the class. Most people agreed that whether they liked the class and the material or not, there were some problems with how it was all executed. Material narrative. The entire reason I took this course was to get a variety of perspectives that would allow me to better understand all sides of queer theory. Unfortunately, all the text we read seemed to push a very similar narrative. Although I have avoided ascribing any politics to this course, it is inevitable to note that all of the authors we were reading were pushing an extremely liberal narrative, which is not inherently bad, though it became overwhelming to reread the same ideas and perspectives without seeing some counterpoints, or even just ideas of those who undermined queer theory. In most of my courses, there was an addressing of the counter-arguments or counter-narratives, but here, there seemed not to be. This made the class far less enjoyable, and it felt like a hive mind or echo chamber rather than discussion, though I have always voiced my distinctly unpopular opinions along with a few others. Then we have inconsistency. When it came to write our first paper, we were distributed our prompts. The prompt received was very vague in its demands and criteria, so much so that every student in class that I interacted with was just as confused as myself in terms of what was expected. In order to better understand, in class we asked for clarification and received no concrete response to work with. Subsequently, I met with the professor and asked particulars about my topic, and after receiving some feedback from my professor, I wrote my paper. As I got my paper back, I noticed that there was critique where there had been no warning, this meaning that there were elements of the paper she had not told me or the class that she had specifically wanted incorporated, and this ended up in losing points for something that hadn't been clarified in the prompt. I'm not here to debate a grade, but simply to point out that had there been clearer parameters, I and quite a few others would have done better. I think that's fair. I mean, I'm biased. Knowledge on material. One main assignment in this course was the leading of discussion. While I've done this in essentially every graduate class thus far, in this particular class it did not work the way it should have. Most of the leading of discussion was based on dense queer theory texts that we should have had prior knowledge on. Each text we read was very difficult to decipher. This was an agreement most students came to. So the issue then was, how are students who admittedly do not fully understand the content supposed to explain or impart knowledge on the rest of the class? Surely the discussion might have helped us to get closer to what each text wanted to say. However, it is unrealistic to think we could explain as thoroughly as our professor. At the end of these discussions, there was often no time at all or enough for our professor to clarify what each text intended to do and what the implications were in the larger scheme of queer theory. And the last, juiciest one, preferential treatment. Though I am biased, clearly, myself and a few others have noted distinct preferential treatment occurring with one main individual. While it's useless to name the individual, it was apparent that in terms of position in regards to the discussions in queer theory, our professor and this student were always in agreement. This wouldn't have been such a major issue if she hadn't always responded or added on to the student's argument in comparison to merely acknowledging mine and that of others. This treatment effectively made me feel belittled, disrespected, and honestly very demotivated. As it is now, I fully regret taking this course because I invested myself in participating and always carefully reading for my opinion to be dismissed simply because I often didn't agree with the narrative and generalizations the readings followed. Boom. That's it. So that's what I submitted. if my professor ever comes across it, yes, it was me. I tend to usually sign my name on my evaluations just because I always, in my mind, think these are things that I could say to this person's face. It would be a hard conversation to have, but I don't think I said anything here that is unfair or untrue to my experience. Okay, so let's get to the questions with Kelsey. Okay, so the first thing I asked her was, what was your impression of Sam in terms of the class? Did he have any particular behaviors towards others? Kelsey said he was aggressive towards other people in class. He seemed like if you weren't on his side that you were against him. Even in our 500 class, which was another class we all had together, he had some aggression towards certain people. Outside of class, however, he was a really nice and helpful person. I think if you got along with him outside of class, he was nicer to you in class. And to be fair, the few times I had talked to him in 500, he seemed pretty nice. Like, he was still very, very opinionated on certain things, which is fine, but he was way nicer there than he was when we got to queer theory. But I think it's also because in 500 he didn't really know where I stood on a lot of things. So when he was in class, did he usually find himself in agreement with the same people like you, Becky, and I often agreed? And are there specific instances where he behaved aggressively towards you or someone else in class? So Kelsey said, it seemed like sometimes he would go out of his way to disagree with us because it went against his core beliefs in the slightest. I think that he was overly dramatic about a lot of his stance. I think the people that agreed with him, like our professor and close friend, never got the wrath of him because they knew where to stop or they agreed with him fully. Some of the aggressive moments he had towards myself was when I disagreed with how queer is perceived by others outside of said community. He nearly called my family ignorant because they don't perceive the word queer as a positive word. I say nearly because he felt the need to tell me that he wasn't talking about my family. Then Becky saying she didn't understand the word queer because she's from the Midwest. And let us not forget the slamming of the door in your face. So, okay, let me just explain a little further. So essentially we were talking about how a lot of people still think that queer is a slur. And in fact, a lot of people, when I first started this series, were saying, is that really the name of your course? Like, is it okay to say queer? So when we were in class, we were discussing the queer bathrooms thing, and I made a video about that too, and I'll link that down below. And Kelsey was just saying how like her family still sees queer as a negative word because they still attribute all those negative connotations. And Sam essentially implied that her family was ignorant for thinking that. I'm just like, just because you've accepted a word doesn't mean everyone has accepted the word. So then there's a girl in our class called Becky who was super cool, and she tended to agree with a lot of Kelsey and I's opinions with that class. At one point, Sam told her or implied, I wasn't there that day, that essentially her opinion wasn't valid because she's from the Midwest, so she wouldn't know about being gay or being queer, which I thought was really stupid because if you're always preaching inclusivity, wouldn't it be important to hear other people's opinions, especially when those other people come from somewhere else and have another perspective? That can be really helpful. So hypocrisy at its finest, but okay anyway. So he slammed the door in my face. I hadn't noticed at the time because when I was in that class, I really tried to remove myself from what I was really experiencing. But essentially we were gonna go outside to do some peer review stuff, I think. And he like cut me off and walked in front of me and then just like let the door slam in my face instead of holding it for me. So thanks. Then I said, do you think he thought of himself as a gatekeeper for the LGBT community, even if people in our class voiced that they were part of it too? So yeah, there were people in our class who were not straight, so let's just get that out of the way, and Sam is not straight also. Kelsey said, yes, I do think he was a gatekeeper. I think that he's grown up with a lot of the cis white male privileges that he doesn't fully understand and that he's had his whole life. It was weird that he thought of himself as someone who spoke for everyone. He might have the education, but he doesn't have the life experiences to back up what he wants to be. His comment to Becky demonstrates that. I then asked if there was something that she wanted to add about him or the class, and then she says, I think he's an asshole who needs some experience outside of the nice bubble of Southern California, and the class was the biggest waste of time and money. I learned nothing. I agree with that. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think about this whole series, the class, the comments, whatever. Like, I'm really curious because I know it's been a while and a lot of you have been asking if there was going to be a follow-up to the queer theory thing. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you to my patrons as always, and let's get right into the fan art.